And we're live, so welcome back everybody to another fantastic CSA event. So today we're going to discuss about an exciting topic that is compliance, but we're going to make it exciting. So we have the honor today to have Daniele, that is one of our part of CSA and CSA Global. He is the CTO of CSA Global, but I'll let Daniele introduce himself, and then I'll give you guys a brief update on CSA chapter and what are we doing, who we are, and what do we have in store for us. Daniele, stage is yours. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, what you've been up to.
Okay, thank you very much, Francesco. So as Francesco said, I'm the Global CTO at Cloud Security Alliance, where I've been for now almost 9 years, which is by far the longest working experience in my life, which tells you a lot on how nice is working for CSA full time. It's really quite amazing working environment that gives you a lot of freedom to do things for the greater community. And that is indeed one of the reasons why CSA is so loved by many, because we try to do things and share the result of what we do with the community. Within CSA, as Francesco said, I look after a few things, including compliance, which is not necessarily the most exciting thing to look after, at least in my book. But nevertheless, a quite important piece of cloud computing, especially because it's with cloud, compliance suddenly becomes extremely complex, and therefore, as any other complex problem, is actually nice to look after and understand why and how it can be addressed. With that said, I'm glad to give you the stage back, Francesco. I don't know if you want to say something about the UK chapter before I.
Before I crack on with the UK chapter, I want to introduce one of our another panelists, that is Paul Simmons. Also, Paul is part of the EMEA chapter as well as the UK chapter, so he's looking after, is interconnecting us with the whole chapter across Europe. Paul, you want to give a little bit of background about yourself, what you've been up to, what I've been up to in the UK chapter, and then I'll crack on with the UK chapter usual.
Yeah, good afternoon, Paul Simmons. So yeah, on the board of the UK chapter and also a director of the European legal entity for CSA, contributor to the guidance and a contributor to the lot of work that we're doing with the UK chapter. So yes, get involved with the UK chapter. Lots of exciting things going on for people to get their teeth into.
Talking about the UK chapter, so I'm going to give you guys a bit of an introduction, then I'll leave the stage for Daniele, and then we're going to do a Q&A with a small wrap-up of the next activities and what we are searching for. So we are Cloud Security Alliance UK chapter. We are a local community. We do local event research, webinars similar to this one. We have an annual gateway meeting that is an annual conference where we get all the cloud experts from the UK and also all the cloud providers to present the latest information, the doubts, and discuss what are we looking for. And that is an extremely good channel for us to listen to you guys and listen to whatever you need from us. You need as a Cloud Security Alliance, either local or global, so that we can feed back to people like Daniele and Paul and the other guys from global and the research group on what do we need to do. We do mentoring, we do research, we do events similar to this one, and we do a lot of networking. So we have a channel on LinkedIn. If you search CSA UK, you can be part of our channel and get notified whenever we're doing some research, white paper, activity, or webinar. We have also a Twitter that is getting more and more active, and also a website where we publish all our blogs or our community, and we're going to publish the whole event. We also have a YouTube channel, so I forgot to mention it here, but we have a YouTube channel where all these webinars have been available, and also the AGM the previous AGM are available. But without further ado, I am going to leave the stage to Daniele, because my machine is literally dying presenting this for some reason.
Okay, thank you very much again, Francesco. So, can you see my screen fine?
Now you are able to see.
Okay. Very well. All right. So, first of all, thank you guys for giving me this opportunity to reintroduce to the community the CSA STAR program, which it's a program that I have the pleasure and honor to create and found about 8.5 years ago. So essentially, a few months after I joined CSA. The STAR program is essentially the acronym for 4 important keywords when we talk about cloud, which are security, trust, assurance, and risk. The idea behind the STAR program, it was very simple. So we wanted to provide the community with a program in order to better handle and cope with the changes from the governance, risk, and compliance perspective in the cloud, which certainly are many, and this is, as I mentioned earlier on, one of the most challenging areas that cloud computing brought to us. When we look at cloud, which is essentially an accountability and compliance program, we wanted to found it on 3 main pillars. One is standards, the other one is the use of a certification framework, and then a registry for showing the result of the certification. And I will provide you with a bit more details about that. Clearly, talking about a compliance standard, so a compliance program, the foundational standards are one key component. Because if you want to certify a service or a product against a set of requirements, you need a framework. You need a set of requirements, a set of controls that need to be specific to the matter you want to measure your security and compliance against. And for that purpose, CSA developed, back in the days, now 9 years ago, the Cloud Control Matrix, which has been the first cloud-specific set of control objectives. Since then, CCM has been evolving. Now we are working on version 4. And this is also a call for all of you to stay tuned in order to give us feedback about the new version of CCM when it's going to be out, which is going to be pretty soon. We are planning to release a first draft for public consultation during summer. The other piece of standard there is the code of conduct for GDPR compliance, or the code of practice, better said, which is a set of controls geared towards the pretty big problem of GDPR compliance that many organizations are facing. The second part of the framework, which is really the key, is the certification approach. As you can see, we decided to provide the community with a rather complex structure. The reason why we wanted to do that is because we are looking at a rather complex problem that it couldn't be addressed with very simple steps. So first of all, what we thought of is that cloud, as any matter of in life and any IT services, it needs to be addressed with a risk-based approach. And therefore, the level of assurance that each service has to provide, it has to be in line with the risk that a service or any data in general is exposed to. And that's why we went to an approach based on 3 layers, with a level 1, which is a self-certification, level 2, which is a third-party based certification or attestation, which is going to be one of the main topics of today, and then a level 3 based on the idea of continuous auditing, which it might be a topic for a future webinar. Within this context, as you can see, we try to focus on 2 different pillars. Security from one side, which has been the original focus of our program, and then privacy, which has been a sort of natural extension of the program, especially, as I said earlier, because of the introduction of new legal and regulatory requirements, GDPR in premise. I mentioned already about the standards, so CCM and the code of practice. What I forgot to mention that as everything in the spirit of the CSA approach, both standards are publicly available for free to anyone. So if you haven't done it yet, please go on our website, download both the code of conduct for GDPR compliance and the cloud control matrix. Use it, try to break it. If there is something that it doesn't work, please get back to us and let us know what are your feedback, because that's the way we love to improve our solutions. And then finally, the third component of the program is really the registry, which is essentially a public window, if you like. It's a repository where we make publicly available the result of the assessment based on our best practices. Could that be a self-assessment or a third-party certification? Currently, our STAR registry includes about 1,000 different services, which is quite a lot. Now, the purpose of the registry, I guess, is pretty, intuitive, if you like. We wanted to provide transparency in the market, and we wanted to do by a structured approach for companies to share information with their customer or potential customer about their security or privacy posture. So to give you an example, a company might might use our CCM or the associated questionnaire, which is called Consensus Assessment Initiative Questionnaire, use it to perform a self-assessment of their service, and then publish that information on our website, and in order to provide to a potential customer a detailed view on what they are doing in order to address security. And certainly, this is a key source of information for any cloud customer that wants to make an informed decision. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, the core of the topic of today is going to be drilling down into the level 2 of the STAR program. So looking at the STAR certification and especially at the STAR attestation. Now, the way in which we wanted to build our certification approach was to clearly not to reinvent the wheel. When the STAR program was created, there were already in the market clearly some IT security certification, like ISO 27001, SOC 2, PCI DSS, and many others, as we will see later. So what we thought was, let's try to leverage what exists in the market. Let's try to build, in other words, on the shoulder of the giants, but let's try to fix those limitations that those leading approaches to third-party certification or attestation have, by essentially injecting a set of cloud-specific controls on the top of the existing, for instance, in the case of STAR certification, adding our cloud control matrix on the top of the controls in ISO 27002. So to create essentially a so-called statement of applicability, which is the set of controls you are checked against by an auditor, with a set of cloud-specific controls. The other big variance between ISO 27001 and STAR certification is also that we do apply in our certification scheme a capability maturity model, in a way that the company is not just evaluated into like yes or into a yes or fail, pass or fail type of approach, but we also state the level of maturity of the implementation of certain control. And this is kind of key in any information security management system, and more so into a cloud environment. The other big difference that there is between STAR certification and ISO 27001 is, for instance, the fact that we oblige the ODT to publish in our STAR registry the scope of the certification. because this is again one of the biggest limitations that we can see in classical certification, whereby companies are allowed to say, I'm ISO 27001 certified, without really specifying the scope of that certification, which, if you ask me, I would say that is an information that is extremely important, because in order to make a sound evaluation of those portions of the service you are not responsible to, but you are certainly accountable for, you need to have a clear picture of what the scope of the certification. Now, the other big, second leg of the program has been the STAR attestation. So, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to use the most adopted auditing approach out there. So one certainly was the ISO 27001. The other one, which it was used especially in the US market, but very often elsewhere, especially in those institutions that operate in critical sectors like financial sector or healthcare, the SOC 2 or the SOC engagement in general are extremely used. Now, again, the purpose of the STAR attestation was to make a SOC 2 cloud relevant. For this specific purpose, what we did is to collaborate, to establish a collaboration with ICPA, who is the owner of the SOC 2 engagement standard, and build a new sort of engagement approach that is essentially an augmentation of that includes an augmentation of the SOC 2 trust and service criteria with the CCM controls. So to avoid the limitations that SOC 2 might have when applied to cloud. And this is really one of the questions that many organizations are asking us, like, why should I invest additional money in getting STAR attestation if I have already a SOC 2? Well, the answer there is pretty straightforward. And the reason is that SOC 2, while it's built on a very solid and rigorous approach, it doesn't include within the trust and service criteria a set of controls that are specifically dedicated to cloud. And this is also the very reason why ICPA accepted to collaborate with us in building STAR attestation. So the answer there is pretty obvious. So you need STAR attestation because if you are dealing with cloud computing, you're operating in a cloud environment, or you want to evaluate a cloud service provider that is fit for purpose, you need to have something that is cloud specific. You cannot just rely on generic information security certification. They certainly provide an amazing structural foundation because clearly they are built on solid auditing standard, which is a key component. So the standard you use for auditing, it's one of the essential components of the overall scheme. Nevertheless, as I mentioned earlier on, the other core component is the set of requirements against which someone is audited. So the set of security controls. And from that point of view, the injection of the CCM controls on the top of the SOC 2 is certainly the way to go in case you want to have an attestation that is cloud relevant. So basically, the recommendation for the cloud service provider is certainly, look at an extension of SOC 2 with CCM controls and get a STAR attestation. For the cloud customer is don't be fooled. Take into consideration that SOC 2, it's a good foundation, but it's not going to be sufficient if you want to really address your accountability requirements when you are in the cloud. With that said, in general, as I was hinting before, there is indeed a sort of issue with proliferation of schemes. This is just an example of the plethora of certifications and attestations and authorizations that Microsoft has. So as you can see, you can count over 30 to 40 different ones. Now, this is certainly not scalable from neither the cloud service provider point of view, it's not even easy for a cloud customer to read through, because unless you are really a cloud a certification expert, it's going to be kind of a nightmare to navigate through a set of different logos, and you don't want to be overwhelmed just from the amount of logos you see and trust mark and seals, but you might want to understand really what's going on there. And that's why we believe that the approach that we have created through STAR is really a way to better integrate different approaches. So to have a solid common piece and to understand what are the common requirements between all the schemes, and then use specific vertical pieces of the of controls in order to address some of the requirements that it might differ from one standard to another. In other words, what I'm trying to say here is that if you would make an analysis of the set of requirements that are included in most of the existing certification framework, or security framework out there, you will realize that a good 80% it's a common foundation, because most of the requirements are really general information security requirements that are generically applicable to any framework and any IT environment. And then there is a 20% difference that it might vary depending on the on a scheme, that it might be specific to a certain business sector, or specific to a certain regulation, or specific to a certain standard. So the key there is to try to have to use STAR as a way also to create an integrated program that you can use in order to avoid duplication of in the assessment, and essentially apply a sort of audit once and certify many, and reduce the audit fatigue that many companies are experimenting, both in achieving the compliance to those programs and in having go through and analyzing the information that the cloud service provider is throwing at you. With that said, I'm going to give the mic back to you, Francesco, and open to any questions that we might get from the audience.
Fantastic. We got few questions and few notes. So Stephen has mentioned that effectively 2001 ISO 27001 has effectively the statement of applicability. Nonetheless, in my own personal experience, I find that not showing really well in the certification, while in STAR is much more apparent. What's your view and opinion in that case between the 17, 18 STAR and?
So first of all, when we first conceived the STAR approach, or the STAR certification approach, 27017 and 18 weren't there yet. So basically, the approach we took was to try to fix a gap that was down there. When 17 and 18 were published, certainly they mitigated the issue that the ISO 27001 certification has. Maybe with one exception, that being a classical standard, the speed of reaction to changes, it might not be the same that we are introducing with CCM. This is to say that we believe that 27017 and 18 are certainly a very good foundation. With the CCM, we want to go one step beyond that. So from our perspective, we are setting a bar that is a bit higher than 27017. This is from the let's say relevance of and how stringently the certification might be considered. From the transparency point of view, you said it already, Francesco, we keep on enforcing the rule that we want companies to publish both the statement of applicability as a self-assessment and the scope of the certification, so that the information available to the third party is much more thorough and detailed than what you can get out of a generic statement, I am ISO 27001 certified, with the control of 27,000.
And I've seen I've seen cases where just a server room or just a very piece of non-critical components were 27,001 certified, while the critical component like the data center or the cloud environment were actually not even put in the scope in the statement of applicability. And you have to dig in the documentation to actually find out that. So unless you're very thorough as an auditor or as a client, it's rare to find it. So I like that part of STAR a lot. We have another question.
Just a clarification there. So I'm expecting any auditor to drill down into those details. That to me is given. My concern is much more for the end user. They don't have that auditor mindset. They don't have the skills and expertise to drill down, and sometimes they don't have the resources to do that. So it's important for them to have out of the gate as much information as possible that could use.
I agree, but not every auditor will challenge your statement of applicability. Ultimately, it's up to you to say, well, I just want to go for this compliance, and then all my clients can go and check. So it's really important for a client to go and dig in the statement of applicability. But before, there is another question, Yinka. How relevant are the 17 and 18 in cloud security control? So it's a perfect question for you, Daniele.
Oh, no, they are definitely very relevant. It is the 27,018 in particular. It might be soon considered as superseded by the 27,701, which essentially is the privacy extension to the ISO 27001. So this is a way to extend the scope of the information management system and the set of controls in ISO 27002 with a set of requirements that go much more in the direction of the PII management.
So if a question from me for both you, Daniele, and Paul, if I were to start from the very beginning to audit my controls or to audit my cloud or to assess in my specific deployment of the cloud, what kind of level of compliance or maturity do I have from a control perspective? What is your recommendation and what is your tool set that you recommend? Where do you recommend to start? Daniele, you want to give an overview and then Paul?
Sure. So when you say, just to understand or scope the question a bit, when you say auditing my cloud environment, are you looking at a cloud service provider, or are you looking at a cloud customer that is building a hybrid solution?
Very good specific, very good pointing out. So assuming that I've already selected a cloud provider and I'm happy with the compliance, so I'm deploying an environment in my cloud provider, and I want to be sure that the number of controls that I deploy are compliant with a specific. So my specific deployment is compliant to a specific to a specific framework, or is effectively mature to a specific level. Which tool set do you suggest to use?
Well, I was referring to it before. Certainly, the Cloud Control Matrix is a very good tool for that. It's free, which it doesn't hurt, and it provides I would say a pretty clear overview on what controls are applicable to IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. What are the controls that should be taken care of by the cloud service provider, and those controls that need to be taken care of by the cloud customers. And there's also a reference to a cloud architecture, which is, back to your point, one of the key considerations to be done. Because if you want to apply a control, when you are designing that control, you need to understand where that control applies within the overall service architecture that you are building. And that's a pretty painful exercise, yes, but that's a sort of necessary evil, because otherwise the risk is to try to apply, and before applying, to design controls that either are not fit for purpose, or they are generically designed and they don't reach the goal that they were supposed to. And at that point, you will end up in a sort of like check the box type of compliance, which it provides a false sense of security, but it doesn't really nail the objective.
Paul, any opinion? Thank you, Daniele. Any opinion from your perspective, and you as a practitioner, as a
I think from my point of view, and it's important to stress here, this isn't about just pure, tick boxes, or you can go to any of the big vendors out there, and they're going to give you a big list of accreditations. And I'm a security person by training. I'm a cynic by training. I sat down with a vendor over a beer, and they said, look, when we're doing a response to someone's tender, the answer to every question is yes. And if they don't meet it, it's yes, but
not verify.
And yeah, and there's your problem. So for me, it's really simple. First, understand which formation of cloud you are deploying. And that means whether it's in-house cloud, out-house cloud, how outsourced is it, where is it hybrid? Understand your cloud formation. Is it SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, whatever? Then you need to understand what your risks are in that environment. And once you understand that, then I would be taking CCM and the Cloud Controls Matrix and seeing how those risks stack up against CCM and what is important to me. And then I know the nasty questions to go and ask that vendor.
Perfect. And then I would layer on that I'll apply the virus control in my specific environment. So it's a very
correct. Whether it's expecting the vendor to have these controls,
correct,
or say, but then you understand that these are the vendor controls. These are controls I need to put in place. And then you have a gap analysis to say, actually, we need something to do this and protect us against this risk. And that might be going and getting a third-party tool. It might be going and getting a third-party product that you put into your cloud environment as well. But unless you understand the risk and you understand that gap analysis, you will not end up with a secure system.
I agree. And also I will add the division of responsibility, because it's understanding what you are responsible for, what the cloud environment is responsible for. Having a cloud environment that is PCI DSS compliant doesn't make you necessarily PCI DSS compliant, because you might process card data in an incorrect way, hence breaching the PCI DSS, like storing CVV, like we've seen happening in recent breaches. I'm not going to name names.
Yeah, and because the salesman will have come into your board, and the salesman will have come in and said, look, just shove it all to the cloud. We're professionals. We've done this,
and we're compliant
for other people. We do it all for you, and we take away all your problems.
Correct.
That's what your board or your CFO have been told, which is why you're going to cloud, probably, or in a lot of cases. And actually, that's not quite the reality.
And I agree with Steve. An accredited 27001 certification has to state the scope unambiguously, but it's not always visible. And it goes back to the auditor, how good the auditor can challenge a statement of applicability. And I have another question that is a little bit outside the compliance environment.
Maybe because the point that or the statement that we just saw appearing in the comment, it's a true statement. And I will never challenge that. Those are the rules of the game. The point here is how easy it is to get access to those information. Because at the end of the day, when someone is making an information, it has to be based on information that are readily available to you. Now, in my experience, those information are not that readily available, and that's why we went to a public registry that is always accessible to anyone to avoid that very thing.
Okay, so another question on readily available and visible information. What is your stance on audit as a one-off versus continuous compliance? It's my favorite question.
Well, I'll give you my favorite answer. All this one-off, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, it's like, say, I mean, I've been, lately chatting with, people saying, I'm starting running. I go running 1 every 2 weeks. It's going to make any good for me. I said, well, it's a good start. It's a beginning, but certainly it's not going to be sufficient. No, one-off is certainly not the answer, but not even the classical approach, once per year or once every 6 months, can be the answer. In a way that, if anything, everybody should be aware of the fact that this pace of change that cloud is imposing, and even more after the introduction of agile development approaches or the DevOps, it's imposing a different way to conceive compliance, a different way to conceive governance. And we are looking at security and testing that has to be embedded into the development pipeline. So the answer, it has to be continuous, but with clearly with that specification. When we say continuous, continuous means within the window of opportunity of that specific controls, and depending on the threat you are opposing yourself. There will be controls that should be audited every 5 minutes, controls that might be audited every 6 months, and that will be still okay. So it depends on the frequency of the auditing. It will largely vary on the nature of the control and the nature of the threat. But the idea of a generic audit every 6 months, or even worse, every 12, it might be sufficient for a low assurance type of environment. Is certainly not for those environments that need a higher level of assurance.
Paul, what's your view?
And I totally agree with that, and I think it goes against what we're talking about, this risk assessment in the first place. The thing I would add to that, though, is that these things evolve over time. Generally, you're going to put a cloud environment in, and you look immediately at 3 years, and then it's too difficult to move from it. So therefore, it's going to be 5 years, 7 years. I've seen contracts being put in place for 15 years, just because of the complexity of the environment that people are lifting and shifting. So what is relevant today in terms of threats, and therefore how often you audit, can change within a matter of months. And the problem is, and we've seen this before, originally, going back way when, I'm showing my age now, with antivirus. Once upon a time, I can remember we updated antivirus definitions every week. Actually, no, first every 30 days. Then we moved to every fortnight. Then we moved to every week. Then we moved to every day. And then we moved to, well,
continuously.
It was available, sometimes 5 times an hour. Things evolve. Risks evolve. Threats evolve. Therefore, you have to continuously review, is what you are doing with continuous audit appropriate in terms of how continuous is the audit? Because I can guarantee that what you put in place today will be wrong in 2 years' time.
Even less, depending on the speed
depending
on the speed of the deployment. But on the speed of the deployment, I've clearly seen organization goes into a journey where it's lift and shift is the traditional environment, and then moving into a more continuous deployment and event workloads being deployed, killed, redeployed, rebuilt continuously. So there is a point in time, I think, or in my opinion, and I might be wrong, where continuous point in time compliance become continuous compliance, and that because it's not immediate, and it's not one of the easiest things to do, I guess, continuous compliance. So what's your view, Daniele and Paul?
No, well, I don't think there is too much to add there. Yes, I mean that's it's a maturity process. Asking for continuous compliance to an organization that has recently approached cloud computing, it doesn't make any sense. It would be simply an overkill. The automation comes with maturity. So in the beginning, you might have some ad hoc controls that are implemented. Then the maturity of those controls, it might become more systematic. Then you get to a point where they are really embedded into the design of your service, and that can be checked in an automatic fashion. But it requires time, it requires maturity, and above all, it requires the paying attention to the fact that you might not have the same level of maturity across the whole set of service that you are deploying. Clearly, the more experience you get into the process, the easier it will be. But you need to take into account that you will have within your service architecture services with a different level of maturity that requires a different approach to static versus continuous compliance.
Yeah, thank you, Daniele.
And it's worth pointing out that the whole, cloud is very different. If you've got a bunch of people who are used to doing IT and IT risks and systems in-house, moving it to the cloud, there are a whole bunch of different techniques being used in the cloud, the fail fast. If we've got any doubts about this instance, just break it and load a new one.
It's not the same over hardware in a data center. Break the server and buy a new one, and it takes like 9 months.
Yeah, and the whole risk model totally changes in how you look at compliance when it comes to actually going back and breaking down what you've done and loading a new one up, because the new one may not have the same patches, or it might be similar, but the compliance technically changes if you load a new instance, even though you think it might be the same instance. You don't know. So cloud is a very different environment from an IT environment, and I suppose that the plug for why get involved with CSA is learning what those differences or are from a traditional IT environment to doing your IT in the cloud.
And I couldn't agree more with Paul. I joined this for the same reason, to learn from other experts on how to approach this problem, because it's not a single individual problem, it's a common problem. Cloud Security Alliance was born to solve this problem as a collective hive mind. To bring the CCM was born with the same purpose. And the more we get together, the more we can advance the field of security compliance in a pragmatic way, as practitioners coming together and saying, this is the way to actually build it up. And this is a real example. And I think myself, Paul, Daniele, we have conversation in Circle. This is our platform where we are hosting those kind of forums and conversation. And we have one on the auditability, one on the new CCM. The more you join in Circle, and we're going to announce a more wide what Circle is in our AGM for our UK community. But in the meantime, I'm going to post the link in the comment for Circle. In the meantime, if you want to know more about 7018, 17, 27001, the CCM, come and join and have this discussion with us in the UK chapter or with the wider community. Daniele, you want to... Actually, I have a question for you, Daniele. Quick one, very quick one. What are the major projects that the CSA globally is working on, so people can tune in and be aware of?
Well, there are quite a few. There are quite a few. Just to mention like 3-4, certainly I was referring to it earlier on. My team, actually, and myself as well, we're currently engaged into the CCM version 4, which is going to be a pretty major release, because in addition to the classical set of controls and the 8 questions, we're going to also release guidance for implementation and for auditing. The other, perhaps the biggest project that CSA is working on this year is the Certificate of Cloud Auditing Knowledge, which again, it falls under my responsibility. That is going to be, I've been hardly working with you are involved in that as well, Francesco. Because we believe that that's one of the biggest gap in the market when it comes to knowledge gap. So there is this lack of knowledge or auditing mindset in the community, and we need to make sure that whoever it's approaching cloud is doing so with an approach that is very inquisitive. They need to understand what are the right questions to ask, how to do an evaluation, how to perform an audit, in order to be to build a proper accountability approach within an organization. We recently launched a new working group on blockchain, which has been so far very successful. We are working on a number of different research areas, drilling down in aspects of microservices, container, SecOps, and many others. That's a lot. I guess those are the biggest projects we are currently working on.
Infamous, the Registry 11 or the infamous 10 change all the time is one of my favorite as well. There are tons of artifacts, and I posted some of them, but go in the UK chapter or CSA Global to learn about all these artifacts, or get involved in the community to ask, okay, I have this specific problem, how can? And that's the benefit and value of a community coming together. I posted some link, but unfortunately we have I get always overly excited about sharing what work we're doing. But I posted some of the link of the key element that we discussed today. So the CCM, the certification framework STAR, and GDPR. There are more and more links. So I'm going to leave it here for a quick second. So it's going to be in the recording, and I'm going to put it in the comment. And a request to join effectively the UK chapter or global or any work. So we are effectively a community. So we come together and we are better together because we learn from each other. So we are, of course, doing these events and doing all the work that you can get the result takes a lot of volunteering effort and a lot of effort. So we are currently, as a UK chapter, we are recruiting a number of resources for digital marketing, outreach, and also individual contribution. So if you want to write a white paper, if you want to contribute with a specific topic of research, we are absolutely open to contribution, and we're going to push blog posts. So we had a few of our members writing for our blog and then bouncing it into the global blog post. Any good piece of research gets shared across the globe. And you have a community in the UK of 2,100, I think, people that effectively gonna look at those research, at those elements. So it's a good and polished for you, as well as a learning exercise for the community. So please reach out to me, to Paul, and on LinkedIn, on social media, or on our group, or on LinkedIn group, if you want to join and learn more. And whatever contribution. So even if you have 10 minutes a week, that's good enough. We're not requiring an enormous amount of time. I dedicate a lot of time, but it is not necessary. Even if it's 10 minutes sharing a post, every little helps. I think I heard it before. Again, digital marketing, social media, researchers, bloggers, we are looking for all of you guys. So contact us or write to events at Cloud Security Alliance, because we all see in the UK chapter. But without further ado, quick shout out that we have our AGM in September. www.agm CSA UK is going to be hosted on our YouTube, but there is also the stream on the page. We are opening for proposals. So if you want to do a talk, there is a submit for proposal there, and we're going to evaluate in August and September. We're going to go live with the AGM. I personally have a podcast where I share a lot of thoughts about cloud security, and I invite people in the community. So we have Google, we have AWS, we're going to have Microsoft as well, because they've been shining out a little bit from the competition. But we're discussing topics like continuous compliance, how to secure the cloud, how to do a cloud transformation, how to do a maturity journey. We are also hosting an award, so for the Cloud Security Influencer of the Year, and ceremony will be on the 4th of July. And that will be about it. So I'd like to thank everybody, Daniele, Paul, for joining, but also our members, whoever was listening to us, whoever posted a question. Please share this video so that people can get the knowledge and share the knowledge, because that's what we are here to do. I'd like to thank everybody, and maybe Daniele, Paul, a final message for our audience.
Well, from my side, just thank you to both of you and to the UK chapter for being so supportive of the CSA mission. And I would like to reiterate your message, please, guys. Help the UK chapter to grow bigger, because we really need a strong community. Okay.
Yeah, from me, very simple. If you perceive yourself as being a cloud professional, your future in cloud security, then there is only one place to get involved. That's with Cloud Security Alliance and the UK chapter. So get involved.
Thank you, everybody, and have a good lunch or a good afternoon. Thank you, Daniele. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.